Hello everybody, it's Foo here, and I'm getting really excited about the upcoming Pokemon Sword and Shield games, so I wanted to do a video about them, and I decided to consider buffs, which is something that I talk quite a lot about on this channel, but specifically buffs related to abilities. Abilities are really important in terms of Pokemon mechanics, and they can make or break a Pokemon in terms of how good it is in battle. So I thought I would consider some abilities that could deserve a buff. I'll be counting down 6 abilities that I think are kind of rubbish at the moment and explaining how I think they could be so much better with some pretty simple buffs. If you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing to the channel and also giving this video a like. It will help my channel out, but also let me know what you want to see more of. But if not, that's fine. So ability buffs, is that actually a thing? Does that even happen? Is there a chance that some abilities may get better in Pokemon Sword and Shield? Well, yes, there is a precedent for this because in previous generations some abilities have received buffs. One example from Generation 6 to Generation 7 is that Weak Armor got a buff. So what happens with that move is when you're hit by a physical move, your defense drops, but your speed rises. And in Generation 6, your speed rose by 1 stage each time Weak Armor activated, but now you get +2 speed when Weak Armor activates, which is really strong. It's actually great, very good for some Pokemon that want to set up hazards as a lead, for example, or for Pokemon that like to set up shell smashes with Focus Sash. So you can get a lot of speed with this ability now, and it's really great. You outspeed most things after 1 Weak Armor boost rather than having to try to get more than 1, so that was a massive buff for that ability. Other examples of abilities like this are Infiltrator. When it was first introduced, Infiltrator only ignored Light Screen, Reflect and Safeguard, and it was only in subsequent generations that Substitute was also ignored. Nowadays, Infiltrator ignoring Substitute is the main reason why people would actually choose to use this ability, so again, that was a huge buff. And the other one that I wanted to mention was Oblivious, which in previous generations would only block Infatuation, so Pokemon using Attract. In competitive, Attract is basically never used. It's really unreliable and situational because it depends on your opponent's gender. So people generally don't use that, and it was a pretty useless ability. But Oblivious also now ignores Taunt, which is massive. It's really helpful for things, for example, Mamoswine likes to set up Stealth Rock, and it can do that without worrying about Taunt. Or Licky, for example, a very good Wish passer. It's got a massive HP stat, so it can heal up its teammates by going for Wish, and it could get really shut down by Taunt. But with the Oblivious ability, it's actually able to ignore all of that, so that's really good. Some massive buffs in previous generations, so I do think that we could see more ability buffs in the new generation, and paired with that we already know that there are some really interesting new abilities coming along, so stuff like Cotton Down with Eldegoss and also Neutralizing Gas from Galarian Weezing. We've got some really interesting abilities already, so I'm really hopeful that there'll be some new abilities mechanics, and we'll look at 6 abilities that are kind of not so great now in competitive and how they could be a lot better. So these are the top 6 abilities that I hope to get buffed in Pokemon Sword and Shield. The first one is going to be Runaway. Runaway is kind of useful in game. What it means is that you can guaranteed run away from wild battles, and it doesn't matter what ability the opponent has or whether they're much higher level or much faster than you. It doesn't matter. You will be able to run away from any wild battle. However, in competitive, it doesn't have any effect. It doesn't make any difference for your Pokemon, basically. And I think that a really simple change that would make so much sense would be that Pokemon with the Runaway ability could switch out of other Pokemon that might have trapping abilities, things like Shadow Tag or Arena Trap, so you could ignore those abilities with Runaway. Also, maybe if you were trapped by a move like Wrap or Bind or Fire Spin, things like that, you could still escape. And also a big one, I think, would be ignoring Pursuit. So if you switch out when the opponent goes for Pursuit, they can still hit you with Pursuit and it does double damage. But with Runaway, it makes sense that you run faster than the Pokemon can Pursuit you. So again, Pursuit wouldn't be able to catch Pokemon switching out with this ability. Now, Pokemon with this ability generally aren't seen too much in competitive anyway, because it tends to be given to early route Pokemon with low stats. So examples of Furret and Raticate. But one Pokemon that is used quite a lot is Dodrio. It doesn't have very useful abilities as it stands, so Runaway with these mechanics could actually be kind of useful for Dodrio. But what I think would be great is if a Psychic type Pokemon or Ghost type Pokemon got access to Runaway with the ability to ignore Pursuit, because right now Pursuit is just so powerful in taking down Psychic and Ghost type Pokemon. It would be nice to have a Pokemon that would not have to worry about that at all. It would mean that there would be a pretty good example of that typing. We don't have any such Pokemon right now, but it would be neat to see in the new games. So that is my idea for Runaway, and I really think that it should be implemented. The second ability that I think deserves a buff is Illuminate. Again, another ability that really only has in-game usage and not competitive usage. So this doubles your encounter rate. When you're walking through long grass, for example, you're twice as likely to find a Pokemon. However, in battle, this does nothing. So what I think would be interesting for Illuminate would be if it could reduce damage from Dark type moves or be an immunity to Dark type. I think that this would be good because it kind of makes sense. You've got a bright Pokemon that takes less damage from Dark type and Darkness. I mean, that makes sense logically to me. But also, Dark type has some of the best moves in the game. So like the aforementioned Pursuit, it's very, very good for trapping, and it leaves your opponent with very few answers to this. You've also got Sucker Punch, a very good and kind of strong priority move, and then you've got Knock Off, which is one of the most ubiquitous moves in the game. It's strong and it removes your held item, which is such a potent additional effect. So having something that will be immune to this would be incredible. It would be so useful. And actually, there are some really good examples of Pokemon that would straight away gain a lot from these abilities. The main one being Starmie. Starmie wouldn't be able to be Pursuit trapped. It wouldn't be able to be knocked off. This would actually be an answer to Dark types rather than being weak to them, which would be crazy, and I think it would actually really boost Starmie's viability. Starmie already has good abilities, but bolstering your defense against Dark types would be so good for Starmie, so that's something that I'd love to see. Also, Lantern, a very bulky Pokemon, being able to take on Dark types better would also help. So I think that straight away just implementing this change would be great. Now this one comes with a caveat, because Illuminate against Dark types makes a logical sense in the English versions of the game, but I do know that Dark type in Japanese is translated as Evil type. Having Illuminate against Evil, it's not as clear-cut a match there, so maybe it won't work in the Japanese versions of the game, but I think it would be neat to implement, and anything that can help protect against Dark types would be cool. The third ability that I'd like to talk about is Healer. So Healer is an ability that you can use in doubles, which means that you have a 30% chance to heal your ally of status in a doubles battle each turn. The issue is that this doesn't have any use in singles whatsoever, and in doubles even then it's kind of situational because you have to rely on your opponent statusing your partner. So it's a pretty limited move really, and very situational. What would be really neat though is if Healer actually also worked on the user itself, because then it would have utility in singles, and also in doubles it would be better because it wouldn't matter which of your Pokemon gets a status ailment, you could heal either rather than it only healing your ally. So that would be a massive buff for this, and some really important Pokemon get this ability. Things like Mega Ordino. Now obviously Mega Ordino won't be in the new games, but this Pokemon would benefit so much from having a useful ability in singles, because a lot of people do play the singles format, and Mega Ordino has great stats, a very good move pool, but just an ability that is doing nothing for it there. So having an actually useful ability, especially one that could cure it from Toxic, for example, one of the best ways of taking the Stally Mega Ordino down, that would be so valuable. And then you've also got things like Blossom, another defensive Pokemon. It's a grass type. It's actually recently got access to Quiver Dance, so not having to worry about status on Blossom would also be useful, and I think that this will be a really neat one to implement. I know that it's nice to have abilities that are kind of focused around doubles, but for this ability there's no reason why it can't be useful in both singles and doubles, so I would like to see this one implemented. So the fourth ability that I want to highlight is going to be Pickpocket. This is a very strange ability with a very limited distribution. What happens is that the Pokemon with the Pickpocket ability is able to steal an item held by the opponent when it's hit by a physical move from the opponent. Now, this one's weird because it means that your Pokemon has to be hit by a move and you can't be holding an item for that. So you have to be prepared to take a move and you have to then not have an item when the move has hit so that you can steal the opponent's item. Now, the main issue with this is that the Pokemon that get access to this ability are very frail. So there are things like Weavile and Shiftry that are definitely offensive Pokemon and they don't like taking hits very much at all. In fact, they're more likely to be one-hit KO'd and not be able to steal anything because they've already fainted, and also they like holding items to do more damage. What I think would be better is if Pickpocket actually activated if you attack the opponent with a physical move. So you don't just rely on the opponent attacking you, but if you attack the opponent, because in that way you have more control over how you use this. These Pokemon are fast, and then they won't have to take a hit because generally they can't. So if you are able to attack the opponent and steal whatever item they have, that would be a much better use of Pickpocket. Pickpocket might be better if it had a wider distribution or if some more bulky Pokemon had it, but as it is, this is definitely a change that should happen, that you can steal items when you make physical contact with the opponent rather than them making physical contact with you. Still, I don't think it's going to be that valuable an ability, but currently Weavile doesn't really have very useful abilities, and if you're not using Shiftry on a Sun team, then maybe Pickpocket is actually the ability you'd want to use. So that's my suggestion there. The fifth ability that I thought deserved a look would be Flower Veil. Again, this is more of a doubles ability. It's only distributed to fairy types, things like Florges and Comfey currently. And what it does is it protects your grass type allies from status and stat drops. Protecting Pokemon from status and stat drops is actually a very powerful ability. So I thought that maybe an easy way of doing this would also be that it protects the user of the ability as well. But actually, coming to think of it, I think that's a bit too strong, because being immune from status and being immune from stat drops is crazy, and it does make sense that in doubles you only protect your partner from that. Now, one way to make this ability maybe a bit more balanced would be to either protect from status or stat drops for the user as well as the ally, and that would be a neat way of doing it. But I just am trying to think of a way that it could be useful in both singles and doubles, because when abilities aren't useful in an entire format, it just feels like such a wasted ability. So I would say either protects the user and allies from allied grass types from status, or the user and allied grass types from stat drops. I think that this one is much more tenuous, but I do think that it should be useful in singles as well, and that's what I came up with. If you guys can come up with a better option for Flower Veil, let me know in the comments section below. The last ability that I'm going to talk about today is Anticipation. What this does is when you switch your Pokemon with Anticipation into a battle, if your opponent has a one-hit KO move like Horn Drill or Sheer Cold, or it has moves that are super effective against the Pokemon with Anticipation, then the Pokemon with Anticipation will shudder. So it basically scouts a little bit for you. It gives you some information in the battle. The issue is it doesn't tell you what the move the opponent has is, so it is very limited, and even then it's probably not that useful even if you do know that, because generally when you're in competitive, you kind of can predict whether the opponent has super effective moves or not. You can do that by type matchup, and you can play around it and scout in those ways. So I think that Anticipation is very limited in how useful it is at the moment. What I think would be better would be if Pokemon with Anticipation could potentially ignore entry hazards and any entry hazard damage, maybe as well as this warning. But entry hazards are prevalent in competitive, and ignoring them could be really helpful. If the opponent has got loads of spikes stacked up against you, then you could completely ignore that, and I think that would be a really neat way of making anticipation just a bit more valuable in the competitive format. There are other ways that this could be more useful, potentially if it told you what move the opponent had that was a one-hit KO move or a super effective move, or maybe if once it's activated and the Pokemon has shuddered, it gives them like a defense or a special defense boost because you know what's coming, you can prepare yourself for that, and that's reflected in like a defensive boost. I think that will be pretty cool too. But yeah, those are just some options for anticipation. I think there's a lot of scope for different things that could be done with this move. I quite like the ignoring entry hazards bit, but the other options that I've mentioned I think could also work too. So let me know which you think would be better for anticipation. Also, I want this to be kind of a start of a conversation, so if there are any abilities that you think aren't so great at the moment and you can think of a way that they could be buffed in the new games, then let me know in the comments section, because I'd be really interested to hear that. I know that some abilities have some real potential but just don't live up to that at the moment, so I'd really like to know your guys' thoughts too. But that's all for today. Thank you very much for watching, and if you did enjoy the video, please do leave a like because it does help a lot. All that's left to be said is I've been Foo, you've been awesome, and hopefully see you next time. Goodbye.